So welcome guys, this is step 1 to grounding a 200 amp service panel. So minimum requirements for grounding a 200 amp panel are going to be 2 ground rods, okay, within 6 feet minimum distance, okay. As you can see, I've disassembled one just so I'm going to show you guys how to put it back together. Alright, you have the second ground rod within 6 feet of your first ground rod, okay. The last piece is going to be your cold water pipe, which typically is going to be at the front of the house. Okay, so what I tell my students is I like to put my ground rod or ground electrode typically next to my cold water pipe, which tends to be in the front of the house. Okay, and it's also the first aspect of your inspection. When an inspector walks in, he notices the cold water in the front and how you've installed the ground rod and bonded them together. Okay, so first off, you have to have your first ground rod in. Okay, first ground rod needs to be 8 feet into the earth. Okay, 8 feet. That means it needs to be going in 8 feet. You have to explain this properly to all your students. Okay, we can't go into the concrete here. All right, so we're gonna have to strap this on the wall somehow. All right. After that, you need to run your number 4 armored shield ground cable. Okay, so as you can see, this is number 6. Okay, we're gonna be using number 6. For our labs, for practice, but you have to explain to your students that we use number 4, and it's number 4 AWG stranded wire, and it needs to be one piece going from the panel to your first ground rod, linked to your second ground rod, which is minimum 6 feet away. So that can be 20 feet away, the second one, or 6 feet away. We have it 6 feet away in our classroom, okay, but it needs to be bonded lastly to your cold water. So before I start this, it needs to be bonded first of all to your panel, number 1. Okay, your ground wire then will come down into your ground rod, which is an electrode you have to penetrate into the earth, 8 feet. That'll be your first one. Okay, now we can't do that in class obviously, so I'll repeat myself again. We'll strap it somehow to the board that you're working on. Okay, the second ground rod is going to be within 6 feet. Within 6 feet. Okay, so within 6 feet, tied lastly to your cold water, main cold water. Now one distinction, okay, the aluminum clamps that we use are double for your ground rods, okay, but for your cold water it's going to be single. Okay, if you want to come a little bit closer right here, go right ahead. So this is a single clamp, and it's for your main water to be bounded, and you can see the armored shield is sitting on this clamp right here. You have your copper touching to your clamp, and that's fine. Number 2, it needs to be linked going in and out of a double clamp. Okay. So the students need to know that this piece has to be covered. Armored shield needs to be covered. The part that's touching your ground rod is in the middle. This also needs to be covered. As you can see, it's almost coming off here. All right, it needs to be covered, and the only part that's exposed is in the middle, which is your bare copper. Okay, so that's the second piece. First piece is right here. Okay, simple demonstration. It's going to go back to the first ground rod. Excuse me, first ground rod, second ground rod, and cold water all need to be bonded together and linked back to your panel. Okay, I will repeat myself again. From the main panel, okay, your neutral and ground bus bars are linked together for a reason. Okay, so you must bond it to the main panel. After bonding it, you drop down to your ground rod. Ground rod gets bonded. That's number one. Bond to the second ground rod, and finally to your cold water. So three parts need to be bonded together. 2 ground rods, cold water, and finally you link it to your panel. All one piece. You cannot set up a junction box and splice in the basement. This wire has to be all one piece for proper grounding. So in this situation, your ground rod is already in 8 feet. So we'll explain that to the students, and as I said, we'll strap this somehow to the wall. Make sure you properly show them and explain to them that this piece is going to be sticking out about 2 feet, a foot to 2 feet, I believe the code says. It may stick out. Okay, I usually penetrate up to leave about a foot out when I do my ground rods. A foot and a half. Okay, so the first part, you have to tighten your clamp. Okay, so this, again, I'll repeat myself, is a key part that inspectors look at. Okay, the shielding has to be protected. So you want to make sure. Okay. The important part is the copper right there it sits on, and I'm covering my shield. Okay, shield is covered. You want to make sure you squeeze that. Armored shield needs to be squeezed at that point. And then again, in a 200 amp service, this is going to be number 4. Okay, now for our practices, we're using number 6, which is fine. And then in the middle, your copper needs to bond. This is bonding, grounding and bonding. You can see this part, I don't have any exposed copper. Okay. Missing a screw. So just to reiterate on the video, okay, you have a double clamp, double clamp for your ground rods, okay, and a single aluminum clad clamp for your cold water. You must use double so you can go in and out of your electrodes. Okay, there's no other way. You have to go in and out. So this part needs to be covered like that. Shield needs to be covered. Same with the bottom, in and out. Okay. Lastly, we have to tie to our panel. Let me pull this strap real quick here. You want to mention to your students that this is going to be a concrete wall that you're strapping against. Okay, you're going to have to put straps and yellow anchors and strap prior to running your wire. Okay. So here we would also have a ground bushing. We're using an MC connector for this demonstration. Okay. And as I said, in your main panel, your ground and neutral are bonded together. Another distinction you have to make with your students So when you use the ground bushing, keep in mind ground bushing is a little bit harder to work with than the MC connector we're using here, but this will do for now. And lastly, we're gonna land our ground conductor, which has to be, again, I'm gonna repeat myself, has to be number 4 if we're doing 200 amp service. Okay, inside of the ground bus bar. So, ending it there. You might want to have some more straps. Again, this is a quick demonstration. All right, you want to make sure that your armor shield is properly strapped. Okay, and again, the ground rod is going to go usually within clearance of the panel. Okay, so you have to also keep in mind some areas have hard rocks and mountains, for example. So you may penetrate this ground rod. It may seem simple, but it may not go down into the earth. It may get stuck, and you may have to try another spot. Okay. One thing I want to finalize with, again, 200 amp service. We have to remember 2 ground rods only. The service rating goes up 320 and above. Okay, a UFER may be added. Okay, so UFER, again, we don't have it in our class, but it's 25 feet of concrete enclosed grounding. So that means we're bonding into the structure. So I'm not sure how far you want to take it with your students, but we're going to go up to 200 amp and explain to them the basics that are required for a 200 amp service, which are, again, I'll repeat myself, 2 ground rods minimum, 1 ground rod in the front of the panel, okay? Next one within 6 feet of the panel. That means you can put it 6 feet away, or you may put it in front of the house where the cold water is, okay? So, the reason, again, why I put it in the front, it's the first thing that an inspector catches when he walks in. Oh, cold water, ground rod is in there, clamps are put in properly, clamped together, okay, it's strapped, it's neat, and that's as the first thing he'll notice, and by that time, he won't be hesitant to check everything else, okay? So it looks, as soon as he walks in, that's the first sign that you're showing as a professional electrician. Okay, that's all I got for you guys today. That's it.
Say your name.
Narek Abrahamian, UEI Reseda.